Why don't you share with this audience who your opponent, Jack Bergman, is and why he is antithetical to everything that you have talked about?
He was a lieutenant general in the Marine Corps Reserves. He's a commercial airline pilot for many years. Most importantly, he didn't want to certify our elections. He didn't want to investigate January 6th. And Matt and I, when you bury our black and brown Marines and then you see a Confederate flag in our nation's capital, that should strike outrage. And for that not to be the case, to me, was against everything that we have fought for. His divisiveness, his extremism, encouraging people to be against each other and not towards something. To me, it's just such a betrayal of his oath of office and also trust. I think as a veteran community, we need to have each other's back, but also for the nation, for the country. I mean, this is what we have stood up to defend.
I'm thrilled today to be joined by the woman who is going to be the Democratic nominee in Michigan's first district, one of the largest congressional districts in the country, the largest east of the Mississippi River. It is a pristine and beautiful spot in America, bounded by forests, the tranquil aqua blue waters of the Great Lakes, and sadly, it is represented by an extremist congressman, Jack Bergman, going for his fifth term. But there is a better alternative, and that woman is Callie Barr, and I'm thrilled that you're with me today. Welcome, Callie.
Thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today.
You bet. Well, we're going to talk a lot about your life and your candidacy, but let's start out by talking about your husband, because you were a military spouse. He was a gunnery sergeant in the United States Marine Corps, and your family is one of the 1% that sent its loved ones into harm's way, into combat. Your husband is a Marine Corps combat veteran of the Battle of Fallujah, which is some of the most intense urban combat in the history of the United States Marine Corps. And I'm just hoping that you might share a little bit about, that part of your life. When you look back, take us through an overview of 18 to 30 for you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I met Matt in high school, and both of us come from a small town where, our families go 5 generations back. And,
And
we
that
come
small town is Traverse City, Michigan.
from Sheboygan, actually,
Okay.
right below the bridge there, Sheboygan, Michigan. And, we come from patriotic people who love their country. And, September 11th occurred while we were in high school. And, I remember Matt coming to me and saying how he wanted to fight for his country. And, I didn't know what that looked like. Right. But we knew we were in love and we were young. And so we got married, 18, 19, was in the Marine Corps, and we moved, all over the country. During that time, I worked to get my teaching degree. And, those experiences that we went through the Marine Corps, they molded us, they shaped us. We grew up into an adulthood believing in something so much bigger than ourselves. And, I held the hands of my very best friends at the gravesite of their loved ones. And, the question that hangs in the air when you do that is this worth it? Is it worth it? And, for Matt, he dealt with post-traumatic stress and a traumatic brain injury. And in his darkest moments, when he wondered if it was worth it to live another day, I would tell him, we are witness to something. And in this fight, Matt, is so worth it. It's so worth it. And this country, service to something like this country, to our democratic ideals, is worth it. And to me, that has inspired everything that I've done since then. because I want us to be worth those sacrifices as a country and as a people. We are a nation where you can live the life that you want to live, right? Alexei Navalny was murdered by the Russian government for exposing its corruption. We live in a country where you can protest, where you're allowed to be angry, where as a woman you can wear what you want to wear, where you have rights. And so to me, fighting for those things means everything, and it all comes back to that experience that we had together, fighting for each other. And that's the thing too, right? Like, we are Americans before we are anything else. We're Americans first. And to me, what has been such an attack on our democracy is an attack on us as a people, which is to say that when we are more focused on partisan affiliation than we are as seeing Americans first, we're doing our history and ourselves a disservice. So, Matt, he came back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and he struggled some, but he reached out and he got help. And I was very much a part of that. I worked with the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregiving and Blue Star Families, where we had families that, young women mostly, who are caregivers, who are looking at the next 60, 80 years with a husband who had maybe no legs, and they had children. And what does that look like now? And it was through that experience that I then was inspired to get my law degree. I felt like I needed more tools in my toolbox. And that was when Matt sort of made the decision to retire from the Marine Corps. And then we've had this polarization and Jack Bergman here in our home. And, he didn't want to certify our elections. He didn't want to investigate January 6th. And it was such a betrayal to everything that we believed in. And so for both of us, really, it's a family effort. We feel like this is just showing up again.
What do you take away from that, to somebody who's in that low moment right now, that when you shared a few minutes ago this point where you're having a discussion with a gunnery sergeant in the United States Marine Corps, an infantry gunnery sergeant, tough guy, not inclined to ask for help. This moment in the country, in people's lives, there's a wisdom that comes from that seems pretty absent to me as a casual observer in the Congress. That seems like a pretty important element that somebody ought to be able to address and speak to. There are people there that can, but not a lot. And I just wonder how that informs your candidacy, that you came through that to a law degree, to the precipice of the Democratic nomination for the first congressional district in Michigan, with a real commitment to service. Just take us like a little bit deeper, if you might.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think as a military family, one thing for us that was always uniting is that we had each other's back, right? You're not asking, are you a Republican? Are you a Democrat? Are you a Libertarian when you're jumping on a grenade to save someone's life, when you're showing up to watch a baby, when you're there for someone when the spouse is on deployment. You're there for them because they're an American, right? And because you're in this together. And we are in this together. And if we decide we can't work together, then we won't. And that's not democracy. And, I think what we always remember is that we have been great because of our differences, because of them, not despite them, right? It's been being able to pull on the skills and the strengths of people that are different from us that have made us a great nation and made us a great military and made us as strong as a people. And so I think what's always been important for me, even in this moment we're living in, is just to remember that Americanism has never been about perfection. It's been about progress. It's been about coming and working together towards a goal and continuing to work again towards it, right? And sometimes I see this as like climbing up a mountain, right? It's not always easy, and it takes a step by step. And sometimes, you got to take your breath. It's not always a straight line. but we can't give up on it because, when you reach that summit, when you keep taking those steps, I mean, you reach heights that human history has not seen. And I believe in that. I still believe in that very strongly. And I think we have to. I mean, I look at my two young girls, 13, and my youngest will be 10 this month. And I feel such a sense of responsibility because they have a dad, right? Um, we have this opportunity, and to me, that opportunity is a responsibility. It's a responsibility because there are those among us that have already given so much, and it's time for us to take that pack and push forward.
Does it sting a little bit more that Jack Bergman was a Marine?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it does.
Why don't you share with this audience who your opponent, Jack Bergman, is and why he is antithetical to everything that you have talked about with such deep eloquence thus far?
Right. So he was a lieutenant general in the Marine Corps Reserves. He's a commercial airline pilot for many years. He's from Minnesota, I believe, originally, and very famously has lived in Louisiana. I think he owns like a hunting property in our district and says that's his primary residence. But most importantly, he didn't want to certify our elections. He didn't want to investigate January 6th. And for Matt and I, when you bury our black and brown Marines and then you see a Confederate flag in our nation's capital, that should strike outrage. And for that not to be the case, to me, was against everything that we have fought for. His divisiveness, his extremism, encouraging people to be against each other and not towards something. And so for me, he's even like he supported the Tommy Tuberville blockade of military promotions. Being a military family, I can tell you how hard that would be, not knowing where you're going to move or live or where your kids are going to go to school. Military family readiness in general. When he votes against funding for Ukraine, even Mike Johnson said, right, I'd rather send American bullets than American bodies, but he voted against that. That's unconscionable to me. He voted to not adequately fund the VA. These are services that my husband relies on and many families in our district. We have a very high veteran population. And so to me, it's just such a betrayal of his oath of office and also trust. I think as a veteran community, we need to have each other's back, but also for the nation, for the country. I mean, this is what we have stood up to defend.
At the core of Americanism, of course, this idea e pluribus unum, out of many one, that we are a civilization, a nation bound together by shared history, shared pain, shared ancestry, shared stories, which include our divisions, which include our differences, which include our worst days and our greatest moments. But at the core, elementally, foundationally, cornerstone of the society is that we choose our leaders in an election. And so I just want to dispense with something up front. If you lose the election in November, you will do what?
Run again.
Right. Will you concede the election if you don't have enough votes to be the winner of the election?
Yes, because that is what you do. And that's the power of our election system, like you're saying, that's the cornerstone. It's that your voice is your vote. And so we have to acknowledge the vote, which is the voice of our constituency, our people here, and to deny that is to deny their voice. And like you said, this is we the people, right? That's the intention of our democracy.
So let's talk about your district and how you win this race and what you need, right? You need resources, right? You need energy. This is a Republican district, though.
That's right.
You're a Democrat running in the district. It's a polarized time. Donald Trump is going to win that district over Joe Biden substantially. How are you going to do the toughest thing that people have to do in politics, which is to win an election going against the grain, which can absolutely be done. And I think you can do it. But take us inside what it's like to run in a Republican district. And so take us inside the plan to scale that mountain to meet that challenge.
Thank you. Well, that's right. I mean, it's so for one, geographically, right? A huge district and a rural district. And I think in our rural areas, it's really important that we're running candidates who are from those districts because I can tell you having a shared experience is so very, very important. And, it kind of, I think, focuses your messaging on what's really important for the people in your area, right? Like you can't plug and play in these districts. You're not just going to find a Democrat somewhere and say, run up in Northern Michigan and that's going to work. That's never going to work, right? And so for our district, when we look at it, there's a lot of, and I think this is true for many rural areas, there folks here feel really left behind. And I don't think that they're wrong in feeling that way. And so a lot of it is focused really on local kitchen table issues. It's housing, it's putting food on the table, it's childcare, it's healthcare. In my district alone, we're losing a hospital in Ontonagon, a post office might be closing. We have, 200 jobs we just lost a couple months ago in another city here in our district. And so recognizing and speaking to those issues and saying, hey, look, we don't have representation on the national level right now. This is our seat. We need to bring our great ideas as a rural community to Washington, D.C., because we are going to be the ones that are going to have the solutions that uniquely work for us. Not someone who's, trying to impeach the vice president, but voting against rural broadband internet, right? Because in my district, we still have a lot of areas that are still getting rural broadband internet. We've never had also, I think it's important, a woman on the general ballot in the history of this district. And we're ready for that, especially right now when we have.
That's pretty incredible.
It is incredible. There's never been a woman on the general ballot for the first congressional race in Michigan for a major party. But, and also at a time when we're looking at women's rights, Bergman co-sponsored legislation that had zero exceptions, not even to save a woman's life. And so we know that that is thankfully not a popular stance. And we know that that's been soundly rejected across the country. And we're looking forward to that being again soundly rejected in our district. And so, and we have a high veteran population. So, he runs very much on this I'm a general marketing, really. And for me, it's really important to bring that back and to talk about Matt and our experiences as a military family and really taking care of our own. In our rural areas, I mean, it is truly, we rely on each other because we are more isolated. And so just bringing that back again, right? I mean, it's rejecting this otherness that there's some evil person down the street who, whatever the conspiracy theory is. I mean, we know these people, right? I mean, I know the judge downtown, right? He married Matt and I. We know the farmer, we know the person. And so it's like, we know each other. Okay. We know how we vote. We know each other. We're electing a government to represent us. Right. And so it's bringing the macro to the micro and talking again about our issues locally and how those translate and needing a representative who's really representing us in Congress. And, we need the tools to do that. That's paid media. We have an older voting population. So you definitely need to be on TV. Mailers, ones that my kids haven't, drawn faces on yet, which they did do when I got those in the mail. Digital advertising, all the tools. So we do need those. But what's a great plug for our district is, we have the cheapest media markets in the state. And so we can do a lot here to message. And I think that's important because Michigan is, we know, a battleground state here in 2024. And getting out the vote is going to be really important. And so being able to message in our district for the people here in a historic election, that's going to support the ballot too. And we do have people here. We have a huge independent voting block. I think it's about 22%. So we do have people that still split ticket vote, that will, strong libertarian streak, will look at the candidate and whether they like that candidate or not. And so we have a path here. It's work. It's hard work. We do travel. People like to see you. So you're always balancing fundraising with those face-to-face meetings, which are really important. But it also means that we're doing meetings everywhere, right? I want to go to the Rotary Club, Kiwanis, our veteran groups. You need to do outreach in spaces where you might not be comfortable. But that's what's necessary.
A couple of questions about your opponent. So last summer I drove across the country, big drive, 4,000 miles up through the Upper Peninsula. And truly, if you come across from Santa Barbara, California,
Okay.
Up through California, Oregon, Washington, into British Columbia, through Montana, through North Dakota, really not until you get into the Upper Peninsula that you do lose completely. You are off the grid, right? No internet, no satellite radio. So when you talk about that infrastructure, I imagine your opponent voted against all of the infrastructure investment that would bring the first district of Michigan into the 21st century, along with rural states like Montana and North Dakota.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I don't, and that's just another example of playing partisan games at the national level while totally leaving behind your entire district and people who are looking. And the internet is so foundational to so many things, right? If it's kids going to school, if it's small businesses, it's really integral to just being connected to the broader world. And to me, to vote against that kind of funding is really unbelievable. It's really unbelievable. This was right. The last technical revolution that we had was the internet. And so we're still getting that, right? And we should have gotten this a long time ago. And so I think to me that, again, that kind of extremism, it's not doing a service, not only to the country, but very in particular to people in our district.
I want to say to everyone who's watching, maybe, hopefully they've all watched the Law and Order episode, right? And, you don't have to be a super detective, right? to figure out a couple of things, right, about your opponent. And I imagine he also supports cutting Social Security and Medicare benefits for seniors in the district.
And he's discussed privatizing those, right? And I have folks that I talk to who are so scared, right? This is their retirement plan, and they're on fixed incomes and worried, what's going to happen to me? Will I be able to afford to continue to live where I live, to eat what I eat? These are not inconsequential things. These have real life impacts on real people. And I think Jack Bergman has forgotten that. I think he's had fun playing a game, and he's forgotten people here and what those real life impacts look like for people who are just trying to make it every day.
When I was talking about detective work, another element of that is, how do you know when your congressman or woman is truly next level terrible? And I'm going to explain it to everybody who's watching this as someone who's been involved in politics for a long time. When the federal budget of the United States is $1.6 trillion, what that means is everyone is getting paid. So if you live in a rural district and they're shutting your post office and they're shutting your hospitals, that means your person is on the pay no mind list.
That's
They don't
right.
care. They're completely ineffective. Think about it. Is it really a big deal in a big city if you shut down one of the 350 post offices? It's not, right? So when you have a chump congressman, that's what happens. let me ask you about him and the Great Lakes. So one of the hallmarks of extreme MAGA is complete indifference to the environment, the ecology,
Mhm.
any weird plans that anybody should know about to build a pipeline to Arizona to pump out the Great Lakes, right, to water-starved areas of the country, because they have all sorts of these schemes that are written about in all these policy books. So has he embraced any of that stuff, or has he been careful on that?
I mean, he proclaims that he protects our Great Lakes, and out of the same, out of the other corner of his mouth, wants to deregulate, the measures we have in place to protect them. And we have like 1/5 of the world's fresh water supply. And when we look even at climate change right now and how that's going to impact resource allocation, not just in the United States, but globally, we really need to be paying attention to the protections that we have for the Great Lakes, not just for our country, but more broadly, right? Even with Canada, right? We have a treaty there with our Great Lakes water. And I this is where I grew up. I mean, I was baptized in these lakes, right? Like this is our economy, it's our way of life. And we have to be stewards of this, right? And make sure that again, we are protecting these, and it's not just for even our community here, but for the entire country, for the world, really.
Take us inside the day of a candidate. What's it like? From what time are you getting up? What time are you hitting the hay? What is your day like?
Well, I'll start with telling people, and then I'll move to what a day looks like. So, I mean, I when I first actually told my mom that I was thinking about doing this, and she I think was right away just so concerned for me. What's going to happen, and this is very scary. And my grandma who's 91, she was like, "Oh, I don't know if I could ever listen to any of this." And I said, "Oh, well, it's okay. I'll be okay, grandma." And she said, "Well, no, I'm worried you might say something wrong." So her concern was a little different, right? Um, and for a lot of my friends, I mean, for people who have known Matt and it made sense. And they were very supportive of our decision to do this. Matt was all on board. I think he has always found a lot of healing and advocacy. And for him, this was another battlefield that morally, this felt like the right fight. And so for our nuclear family, this feels very moral, and it feels very mission oriented. And we have support of our friends and family, even if they, sometimes can't believe we're doing this. I say, but we need more normal-ish people trying to do this. I say normal-ish. I won't claim entirely normal. um, but
That
it's true. I mean, we don't come from wealth. We don't come from a political family, and so all of this has been very new to us. But I think that matters, and I think that representation that we're going to bring matters. So what happens is, we were endorsed by New Politics. They support candidates with a history of service who want to protect democracy, and they were really great in those initial stages of helping me, build out a campaign team. I had contacted, I had Christy Pagan here in Michigan. She helped me launch my campaign. And, the first thing they do, a lot of folks don't know this, is they'll say, okay, you decide on a Monday, you're all fired up. And then Tuesday, you're like, what do I do? I mean, what's actually the next step? And so you start to kind of build your consulting team. And then you have to make a Rolodex of everyone you've breathed on since birth. And then they're like, all right, call it. Call it. Like, you're going to ask them for money. And you're kind of like, oh, and I'm a Midwesterner. Like, we don't even talk about money. And now I'm going to call people and ask them for money. And so you kind of feel like your soul leaving your body a little bit. And it's very humbling. But it's been, and you call, and it's hours every day, right? Hours of just cold calling. And, you call like the person you sat next to in 8th grade, and they're just kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? You're like, it's been a long time. How are you? And they're like, she's selling, right? A pampered chef. Like, what's happening? And then it's like, no, I'm running for office. and those conversations sometimes are really surprising. They're really great. And you make these great like connections again. And then other times it's like, click, don't call me again. But I think, you're kind of, you have to lean in, right? It's a critique in reality of our system that it costs so much money to run. But if you're serious, you have to do that. And we are serious. And so, so this kind of gets into my normal day, which is, I get up with my kids and we get them ready for school, drop them off. I come home, I'm on the phones for several hours. If we have an event, then I get ready, I go to the event, then I come home, and then often I'm answering emails, writing thank you notes. I think it's important to be thankful for people who join your cause. And it's on repeat. I mean, we're looking at probably 12, 14-hour days most days. I try to take some time with my kids on the weekend. And it can be tough dealing with a lot of the criticisms that you get, but I do live with a 13-year-old. So I would say I have some experience already with being criticized. So that's all right. But it matters. And often sometimes even when it gets tiring, you think about kind of what you pointed to, the foundational experiences that Matt and I have had. And sometimes when I've had a hard day, Matt and I will just remind each other of the folks that we've loved who aren't here to do this fight. And every day it gets you up the next day.
What I want to say to everybody who's watching this is we'll talk in a second about a couple of issues, but the collapse that we're seeing in American life is very much bound up in the destruction of the importance of character, public character. And what you're seeing here is a person of high quality and high character, needs your help, needs your support. You all need to be involved, and you need to be involved by helping her raise the money that he needs to throw out of office somebody who should not be there because they denied an election result and tried to overthrow the government. A Marine Corps lieutenant general that denies the result of an election, which is really foundational to the Constitution he supposedly spent his entire life in service of defense of, it's a very big deal. And so this election in the first district of Michigan is a very big deal. It's a big deal election. And the truth of the matter is, she will not get the help she needs from the DCCC and all of the Washington, D.C. committees because she is an outsider. And outsiders need the help of ordinary people to make it under the Capitol, because you want at least a couple people there, which is clearly evident to me from this conversation, that are awed by the institution and what it stands for. And so it's really important to support candidates like Callie Barr. So Callie, why don't you tell people how they can give support to you, how they can get involved in the campaign and all of that?
Thank you so much. Yes, please. I mean, like I said, it's a critique, but it's a reality that we need help. And, I think it's important to remember that we're always building. And so investing in an area, especially in our rural areas, is very important because we're building the infrastructure and the coalitions that we need to take this seat. And especially in a pivotal time, 2024, during these election cycle, where I feel very much like our democracy is at an inflection point. And so please go to my website. It's Callie, CALLIE, FOR, Congress.com. You can donate there. That would be wonderful. We also have our mailing address there for folks who like to send checks. And all of that helps us to have the staff that we need on our campaign team, and also to do the paid messaging that will be really important in our very broad and vast district. And then we also have a volunteer link on our website where you can sign up to volunteer. And we love having volunteers. We have volunteers who do all kinds of things. write postcards. Some people knock doors. Some people don't want to knock doors, right? But there's an opportunity for anyone who wants to help out to help us in this cause. And I want to thank you very, very much.
One of the greatest lies in American politics is that there are no good people to choose from. It is not true. Here is an exceptional one. And the way we put exceptional people into the Congress is by making sure they get the support they need. The reason that Callie Barr has to spend the amount of time she does raising money to compete, to have a voice in Congress for the people is because there's brokenness in the system, because the system sucks, right, in a lot of ways. But in order to change the system, you got to play the game. You have to win the game. The reason I asked Callie Barr to be on this program today is because she can win this election against a guy who has betrayed his oath, betrayed the Marine Corps, betrayed his country, and he did it for Donald Trump. He's a low man, he's a dishonorable man, and he's a dishonest man. And the American people deserve, sitting under that dome, people who are optimistic about the future, who are competent, have character, and able. This is one of them. Support this person. And as we share this clip around, help her raise the money so she has everything that she needs over the next 180 days to beat a seditious lieutenant general. And you ought to know his name. It's not Michael Flynn. He's not alone. Plenty of people out there who have betrayed the country in the last couple of years. The way we get through this is hire people to fix it who put the country first by word and deed. And I'll tell you this, if John McCain were still around, he'd like Callie Barr, be all for her. Think about that. Callie Barr for Congress.
Thank you, Steve.
I'm Steve Schmidt. This is The Warning, and I invite you to subscribe on our Substack, on our YouTube channel. Follow us. Welcome to the community.